January 13, 1982. Washington, D.C. A Boeing 737 lifts off from a snow-covered runway, but it will never climb higher than 350 feet. For 78 seconds, the aircraft fights a losing battle against physics, ice, and human assumptions before slamming into the freezing Potomac River, triggering one of the most astonishing rescues in aviation history. This is the story of Air Florida Flight 90, the flight that froze in the sky. Welcome back to the channel. Today, we break down one of the most haunting and heroic aviation disasters ever recorded. It's a story of weather, training, miscommunication, equipment failure, and the incredible bravery of ordinary citizens who risked everything to save strangers from the icy river. If you love deep dive aviation documentaries, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon, because videos like this take hours to research and craft, and your support keeps them alive. Now, let's begin. Part 1: The storm that changed everything. January 13th began like any other winter day in Washington, D.C. Cold, snowy, and chaotic. A severe snowstorm blanketed the city, paralyzing traffic and overloading airports. Washington National Airport, today known as Reagan National, struggled to keep its single main runway clear. Plows were working non-stop. Taxiways were icy. Visibility dropped, then improved, then dropped again. Inside the terminal, passengers of Air Florida Flight 90 waited restlessly as delays piled up. The aircraft, a Boeing 737-200, sat parked at Gate 12, slowly gathering ice. For many on board, this was supposed to be a routine flight to Fort Lauderdale with a stop in Tampa, a short escape from winter. Instead, it would become one of the most tragic departures in U.S. aviation history. Part 2: The flight crew. The cockpit was commanded by Captain Larry Wheaton, 34 years old, First Officer Roger Pettit, 31 years old. Both relatively young, both confident, both eager to keep the schedule moving despite the brutal weather. But there was one critical issue. The crew had limited experience with icing conditions, particularly the complex relationship between engine performance and snow accumulation on the 737-200's unique turbofan design. It wasn't lack of skill, it was lack of training, a problem that would become tragically clear. Part 3: Deicing trouble. With snow and ice building up, all departing aircraft needed to be properly deiced. Air Florida 90 was no exception. Ground crews sprayed the aircraft with deicing fluid, but delays meant new snow accumulated faster than expected. Worse, the fluid used wasn't ideal for freezing temperatures. It worked, but only for a limited time. As Flight 90 waited in line for takeoff, crews noticed something troubling. The aircraft's engines were barely producing enough thrust to taxi, and yet, no one fully understood why. The real reason? Snow and slush had been sucked into the engines, icing up the pressure sensors that determine power output. In other words, the engines could be losing thrust, and the cockpit instruments wouldn't show it. But the crew didn't know that yet. Part 4: A critical decision on the taxiway. As they approached the runway, Captain Wheaton made a fateful choice. Because their own aircraft had trouble following the taxiway center line in the snow, he told First Officer Pettit to pull close behind a DC-9 ahead of them so the larger aircraft's engine exhaust would melt the snow and ice on their wings. It was a dangerous move and against guidelines. Hot exhaust can melt ice, yes, but it can also blow snow back onto the wings, where it refreezes unevenly. That's exactly what happened. The 737 now had ice-contaminated wings, possibly reduced thrust, critically unreliable engine readings, and no one in the cockpit realized the full combination of these risks. Part 5: Takeoff clearance. 4:00 p.m. the snow continues falling. Air Florida 90 accelerates onto runway 36. From the cockpit, the first officer calls out the airspeed rising, but slowly, too slowly. First Officer Pettit says, "That doesn't seem right, does it?" Captain Wheaton replies, "Yes it is. There's 80 knots. But the instruments are lying. Icing has corrupted the engine pressure ratio sensors, causing the engines to appear stronger than they actually are." The 737 accelerates sluggishly, fighting ice, drag, and underpowered thrust. Still, they rotate. Still, they try to climb. The aircraft lifts off, Barely. Part 6. The 78 seconds in the sky. The 737 climbs at a terrifyingly shallow angle, almost skimming the Potomac River. Inside the cockpit, the first officer realizes something is horribly wrong. "Larry, we're not going up." He's right. The stall warning sounds a shrill, desperate alert. The aircraft is losing lift because the wings are contaminated with ice. The engines are producing far less thrust than indicated. The airplane is essentially flying blind and dying. The aircraft shudders violently. Passengers scream. The wings buffet as airflow separates. Then, the final words, Captain Wheaton. "Forward, forward. Easy. We're going down." A second later, Part 7. The crash into the Potomac. The Boeing 737 slams into the 14th Street Bridge, tearing through traffic and ripping off parts of its fuselage. It then plunges into the icy Potomac River, breaking apart on impact. 78 souls on board. Only a few survive the crash itself, but now they face a new threat. The river is 32°F cold enough to kill in minutes. The fuselage begins to sink. Only a small section remains afloat. Stranded survivors cling desperately to the wreckage. Part 8. The heroes who saved lives. What happens next becomes one of the greatest rescue stories in modern history. Dozens of bystanders rush to the riverbank, unable to reach the survivors through the ice. Then a Park Police helicopter Eagle 1 arrives, piloted by Donald Usher with rescue technician Gene Windsor. They hover just feet above the freezing river, dangerously close to losing lift themselves. One survivor, Arland Williams, repeatedly hands the rescue line to others, refusing to take it for himself. He saves multiple people. By the time the helicopter returns for him, he's gone. Arland Williams becomes a symbol of extraordinary human courage, the man who sacrificed his life for strangers. Part 9. Aftermath and investigation. The NSP's investigation quickly uncovered the fatal chain of events. 1. Improper deicing. The fluid used wasn't appropriate for heavy snowfall and had lost effectiveness during delays. 2. Snow ingestion into engines. Slush clogged the power sensing probes, making the cockpit instruments show false thrust levels. 3. Inexperienced crew in icing conditions. Both pilots lacked winter operations training and did not recognize the symptoms of performance loss. 4. Wing contamination. Ignored the crew. Taxiing behind the DC-9 caused melted snow to refreeze on the wings. 5. Failure to abandon takeoff. Multiple warnings. Slow acceleration. Visual readings were dismissed. Combined, these factors made the aircraft do the moment it accelerated. Part 10. Legacy. Air Florida Flight 90 reshaped modern aviation safety. Improved deicing procedures worldwide. Better engine sensor protection against snow and slush. Mandatory winter operations training. Stricter rules on takeoff performance calculations. Runway contamination standards that remain in use today. But the most enduring legacy is human. The courage of bystanders. The helicopter crew, and especially Arland Williams, the man who would not save himself. Thank you for watching this deep dive aviation documentary. Air Florida 90 is a story of tragedy, mistakes, and unimaginable heroism, a reminder of how fragile life can be, and how ordinary people can become extraordinary in a moment. If you found this video educational or powerful, please like the video, share your thoughts in the comments. What part of the story moved you the most? Subscribe for more aviation investigations, crash analyses, and real-world lessons that continue to shape aviation safety. Stay safe, and as always, keep flying.